Who doesn't love a bowl of summer cherries? We're going to be making a pork tenderloin with a red wine and cherry sauce. So to prepare our pork tenderloin, I've taken one pork tenderloin. This one's about 1.5 pounds. This is just how it came at the store. Put it in a zip top bag. I have 2 cups of water. To that I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of light brown sugar and a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. This is going to be our brine. It's a very simple brine for this pork tenderloin, but it gives, a nice little bit of flavor. So we're just giving that a quick stir. We'll add this to our pork tenderloin. Now the sugar sort of still a little bit at the bottom, so we'll scrape that out. Into the bag. Try not to tip the bag over. Make sure you give it a really good seal so it doesn't escape. Make sure everything, I usually use a freezer bag for this because they're a little thicker and sturdier. Give it just a little bit of a massage, and we are going to put this into the refrigerator for about 6 to 8 hours to let it brine. I've pulled the tenderloin out of the brine. I have put it on a pad of paper towels on top of a cutting board. I'm going to continue to blot it with some paper towels because we're going to put it into a skillet with some olive oil. I've put about 1.5 tablespoons of olive oil in here, and I have that heating up. And I have an oven preheating to 450 degrees because after we get this seared on all sides, we're going to move it into a baking dish and pop it in the oven. So let me get things set up so we can get this going. So my oil is all nice and heated up, a little shimmery, ready to go. I'm going to take my pork tenderloin and go ahead, drop it gently in the pan. Just be careful of the splatter. This is why we blot, so that way you don't have as much splatter when you put it in, because that water hits the pan and creates issues. So we're just going to sear this on all sides. It's sort of about 2 to 3 minutes a side. So you're going to wait until it gets a little brown, give it a turn, let it get a little brown, give it a turn. Keep going until it's nicely seared on all sides. Okay, our meat is ready to turn. You can see there's a nice little bit of browning going on, so it's getting its sear on. I'm going to position it in the pan here and let this go for a few more minutes, and we'll just sort of keep at this until we get it seared on all sides. While our meat is searing, I'm just going to show you a quick little clip of my friend Babette, who came out for her evening meal. She's just a little groundhog that lives next door under the neighbor's shed and is just cute as cute can be. But she also likes to give me the stink eye if I look at her too long. Now, in case I failed to mention, I've been cooking this on about a medium heat. We don't want to sear it too fast, but we do want to get a nice little sear on it. And I think we're about there, because as you can see, everything is looking nicely brown. So what I'm going to do is turn the heat off of this. I'm going to take my pork tenderloin and put it in my baking pan that has been sprayed with nonstick cooking spray. I'm going to put it in the oven on 450 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes until it hits 140 degrees internal temperature. Internal temperature is important for pork, so just keep an eye on it. So to the skillet that we roasted the pork in, I'm going to go and add 2 tablespoons of butter. And again, this is just about on a medium heat. we're gonna use this to kind of get up some of the nice little bits that we got from cooking the pork. To this, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of shallots. If you like a little more shallot, that's all good. Shallot is a little bit more of a delicate flavor compared to a red onion. So if you only have a little bit of red onion at home, you can use that. Just use less, because red onion is just a little more strong flavor, has a little more bite. Shallots are a little bit milder. I mean, I'm not saying they don't have a bite to them, but it's not as strong as a red onion. So we're going to just saute these in our butter and get them nice and soft. Now, because this is an oven-safe skillet, I could have just left the pork in here, put it in the oven, and then when the pork was done, gone ahead and made the sauce in this pan. However, I tend to forget. And what I forget is that the handle of the pan is hot. So I put it in a different pan for baking for my safety and hopefully for yours too. But if you can remember, you can do this just all in one skillet. So got this all getting fragrant and lovely while our pork is cooking. Now to this, we're going to add 8 ounces of fresh cherries. You can use frozen, but go ahead and thaw them out first, so that way you're not getting the popping and cracking of wet things as bad. Also, it doesn't bring the temperature down. So I'm using 8 ounces of fresh cherries. Works roughly out to about 2 cups once I've had them pitted and quartered, because you want them, you know, smaller when you're using them. You don't want a big chunk of cherry, but at the same time you don't want them diced fine. So we're going to saute the cherries in. Now to this, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of a dry red wine. I'm using a Cabernet Sauvignon. You know, nothing special. That was what was the open bottle that I happen to have. But any dry red wine will work for this. I'm also going to add in a tablespoon of balsamic vinegar. So let's scooch that out a little bit. Keep giving it a stir. 3 tablespoons of light brown sugar. Just keep stirring. Get it to dissolve. Now, this is where a little bit of personal preference is going to come in. You want to use about 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. If you like it a little bit less salty, 1/8 is good. A sprinkle is good. I use somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 teaspoon of salt in this. So I like a little bit of salt in this, but I don't like it too heavy. Same with pepper. I like a little bit of pepper in here, but I don't like the taste to be super heavy. So I just sort of do a little bit of a sprinkle, stir it in, and you can see we're sort of deglazing the pan here as things cook. So a little bit of fond on the bottom, but we're getting it nicely deglazed. Now the other strong flavor that's in here is thyme. I'm going to use dried thyme because I don't have any fresh at the moment and the store's been out lately, so dried thyme it is. If you use fresh thyme, you can use a couple of sprigs of it and just float it in the middle and just let it flavor your sauce. If you're using dried, you don't want to use as much because it just has a much more potent flavor. And so I'm going to use about 1/4 teaspoon of dried thyme in this, just because otherwise it does get a little overpowering. So just a little sprinkle through. And if you're not the biggest fan of thyme, you can just do, you know, a very minimal amount and still get the flavor. But you can see that our sauce is all coming together, bubbling away. And what we're going to do is we're going to let this simmer for about 5 minutes. I'm going to turn the heat down on it because I have it on sort of a medium. I'm going to turn it down just a little to a medium low and let it simmer for 5 minutes, and we'll go check on the pork. This is our pork tenderloin right out of the oven. It has hit 140 degrees. Now I'm going to let it sit on this cutting board and rest for 5 minutes before cutting into it. So our cherry sauce has reduced, but it still has a nice amount of liquid to coat the meat when we plate. So I'm going to turn the heat off on this, and we'll just wait a couple of minutes while the meat is resting, and then we'll be ready to eat. So here we are with dinner for the evening, some fresh green beans, and our pork tenderloin with a cherry red wine sauce. Doesn't it look delightful? Hope you enjoy.